3, 2, 1. Liftoff.
Welcome to the Ketamine Startup Podcast. This is where we talk about the business of ketamine, marketing, and more. In this episode, we discuss when ketamine is talked about in the media, especially when it involves public figures like Matthew Perry and Elon Musk. We've experienced in the past in regards to controversies with ketamine, plus discuss the importance of set and setting, ethical practices, and clear communication with your patients and the community you serve. Let's dive into the episode. Welcome to the Ketamine Startup Podcast, where we talk about ketamine therapy, the business behind running a ketamine therapy clinic, marketing, and more. And today we're going to talk about some interesting stuff. So like Elon Musk and ketamine.
Yeah, so you may have heard in the media and the news coverage all about Elon Musk and how he's using ketamine therapy for himself personally for his mental health. And I know that he's getting some pushback from investors and the board, etc. But I found it very interesting, the response from him. What was it that he said?
Yes. So one of the things he was saying is, yes, he does have a prescription. So he takes ketamine when his brain goes super negative.
So I think what he's saying, and this is all speculation and just based upon limited news reports, is that roughly every 2 weeks, it seems like he's doing at-home ketamine therapy, which is helping him get out of his negative, dark thoughts. And what was interesting is in the response to the people who were pushing back against Elon Musk, he was saying to the investors, no, this is something you actually want me to be doing. This is beneficial for the success of our companies. And yeah, it's fascinating how Elon Musk is now using ketamine therapy for himself. And at least as far as the clinic goes, what I've noticed is since that report came out, we've gotten busier, or there's been more inquiries about ketamine therapy because historically people don't know about ketamine therapy as an option. So when they see the world's richest person in the world doing this, it makes them interested. So in a way, it was like advertising, or i.e. just more awareness of it.
And what's interesting is this was in a more positive light that ketamine entered the media, even though there was a lot of criticism and this whole idea of a CEO or a leader that is taking a medication for their mental health, and how people are, pushing back. Some of the things that I'd read was about how people are like, oh, wow, if he's feeling that bad, should he be, leading a company, making decisions? And then, you know what? Like, how many people that are actually in these roles of power or influence or making big decisions, they're hiding their mental health concerns. There's a huge mental health crisis within those that are in the healthcare field. There's a high rate of death by suicide that is occurring in physicians. And part of that is not being helped by the fact that we hide how one is doing, how you're feeling. And so I just thought it was a really interesting segue from when he started talking about, no, this is good for the company. This is good for my mental health. When the leader's mental health is doing well, the trickle-down effect of how better decisions are made. Now, on the other hand, sometimes ketamine can be negatively highlighted in the media. And that was what we saw when it first came out that the news broke that Matthew Perry had died.
Yeah, and with Matthew Perry, for those of you who don't know the full story, and this is again based upon the news, is that essentially Matthew Perry had been getting IV ketamine therapy, I believe in Switzerland, during the pandemic, roughly March 2020. And he was at a rehab center getting IV ketamine, doing really well and being free from his substance use disorders. And then when he came back to the California, SoCal area, I think he then started doing IV ketamine therapy at a clinic. And apparently, a week or two after that, he was found in the hot tub or jacuzzi portion of the swimming pool he was dead, essentially. And according to the coroner's report, they found very high levels of ketamine. They also found buprenorphine. They also found benzodiazepines during the toxicology investigations. So the bottom line was the coroner actually reported, hey, he died from a ketamine overdose. I don't think it was related to the IV ketamine that he had been administered a week or two prior to the accident and the death. But apparently he got his hands on at-home ketamine, whether it was through a legitimate or illegitimate source, we do not know. But apparently he had 10 to 20 times the normal dose of someone getting anesthetic levels of ketamine. So it was very high dose. I actually think that I'm not a coroner, I'm not a pathologist, and obviously they know what they're doing, but it almost seems like it was the drowning that might have killed him rather than the ketamine, or it was a combination, right? Because when someone is undergoing ketamine, whether it's at home or IV, like their consciousness is altered. And sometimes just going into a hot tub without any altering substances on board, like people will feel lightheaded. Like I know for me, if I've had a long day and we're at a hotel and I go jump into the jacuzzi, like I'll feel lightheaded and faint depending on how hot the temperature is. So that can be a risk factor. Plus he had COPD, emphysema, 2-pack-a-day smoking history, liver disease, etc. So it was this, in a way, imperfect storm where he did die. And again, that got a lot of media coverage and people were reporting about it. And our patients got scared at the ketamine clinic. Oh my gosh, what's happening with Matthew Perry? And I think this really segues into this is going to happen. I think there are going to be, as this medicine and therapy rolls out, there's going to be responsible use and irresponsible use. And there's going to be ramifications of that. So what do you think a ketamine clinic owner should be aware of, Kim, as they're navigating these waters?
Ketamine is going to be in the media. And I know for some folks, the idea of, oh, not only am I having to run a business and hire folks and schedule patients, but gosh, I got to market. And then I'm going to have to deal with PR when there's some sort of misuse or misquote about ketamine, and then how poorly that can affect us. You know what? That's life. Unfortunately, I think that goes back to if you find this idea of, this kind of sucks to have to deal with bad PR for ketamine, then maybe you shouldn't open up a ketamine clinic. It's just part of doing business. And honestly, good or bad, you're going to have an uptick on your visitors to your website. You're going to have more questions, patients calling in, or even folks that are like, we've had some where it was like, oh, we always ask, how did you find out about us? Or how do you know about ketamine? And they'll be like, oh, I heard after Matthew Perry's unfortunate death made me go, what is this? Like some folks, any PR is good PR for some. And I think having just a plan and recognizing that I may, as a business owner, as a person that owns a ketamine clinic, I may have to be prepared to make a statement or have something, be prepared to like talk with my patients, letting them know. And this goes back to communication. It goes back to re-educating or dispelling myths and misinformation. Because some of it is just, if you take it out of context, or if you put the same medication in a different setting. So we love talking about set and setting in this podcast. And if you think about it, ketamine therapy in a clinic with a healthcare provider with expertise and experience with ketamine therapy and having a patient with high doses is a very different experience, very different occurrence than an individual by themselves at home with large doses, and whatever the outcome may be. And just being able to talk about this, really ingesting the information about appropriate use, and so that you can actually converse and talk to your patients and also be able to converse with your staff, because guess what? You're not going to be the only one talking to your patients and potential public.
Yeah, I think also this highlights like how powerful ketamine really is. It's not some minor drug or medicine. It's very powerful. And as you probably know, the listeners and viewers, is like ketamine was originally invented to be used as a general anesthetic, right? We use it in the operating room, in the emergency department, et cetera, for use for procedural sedation. That is the FDA indication. So we're using it off-label. And that means that there's going to be a lot more risks. And so for me, this highlights for every clinic owner and potential clinic owner, like really using it responsibly, ethically, with the highest levels of safety and standards and guidelines. And I think that is really important. I think it was Spider-Man's uncle who once said, with great power comes great responsibility. And again, this is a very powerful medication, and to use it responsibly and for the utmost benefit of the patients and for society. And now a quick word for our aspiring ketamine clinic founders out there. If you've tuned into our episode today, chances are you're curious about the ins and outs of starting up a ketamine clinic. It's an exciting field, but let's face it, the journey from idea to actually opening day can be quite daunting. That's why we've created something special for you. Think of it as your personal roadmap, a free downloadable checklist that lays out the essential steps you need to consider when starting up your own ketamine clinic. This checklist is designed to help you avoid common pitfalls and launch your trajectory to success. So how can you get your hands on this checklist? Simple. Just visit www.ketaminestartup.com/checklist and grab your free copy today. We've made it easy and accessible because we believe in supporting our community with valuable resources. ketaminestartup.com/checklist. All right, let's get back to our discussion. Stay tuned and don't forget to download your free checklist during or after the podcast.
I think that you hit on a good point. It's we're running this business, we're providing these treatments in the service of helping others, right? And so what that encompasses is sustainable, ethical use of this medication, this ethical business practices as the business owner of your practice and of using ketamine. But more importantly, part of doing this with heart is being able to educate and share this information too. So it's not just good standard of care and good business practices, but it's also, there's that communication aspect of running a business, the marketing aspect of it, and remembering doing it out of service when you're sharing this information. My belief is we don't try to sell ketamine. We don't try to sell people to get ketamine therapy. What we do is we present how we do our ketamine therapy, how we provide a safe healing environment. And for those that are aligned with the way we want to provide the treatment, they know where to find us and they know that we would be a good match from what marketing information we put out there. And for us, that is one of the ways that we practice serving others by creating content that makes sense, that informs and educates. And yeah.
I had a thought about some of the things that the people have asked us who are considering like, hey, how has this impacted your business? Because of all of this, should I not open up a ketamine clinic? So what are your thoughts on that?
If this scares you off, then don't open up a clinic because there's going to be so many challenges. There's going to be ketamine shortages. Who knows what the future may hold with cracking down on how easy it is for physicians or clinics to purchase ketamine. That could be a whole podcast and episode in itself. There's so many different things. So the idea of a bad event that is not directly related to you being very scary to hurt your business, if you could follow that, then don't do it. Honestly, whenever ketamine pops up in the media, we get more phone calls, we get more emails. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but if you find that stressful, then either don't do it or be part of some aspect of the business that doesn't require you to have to deal with it.
Yeah. And to add to that, you can still do it and still be afraid, right? Because that's where sometimes that's the definition of courage is. And I think I've said this in other podcasts, is like the definition of courage is action in the face of fear. The first time I had to do emergency cricothyrotomy, that was scary. I had done it on cadavers during residency, but it's a high risk, isolated, rare event. But I still did it anyway because I had to save this person's life. So I still did it. So it goes back to the motivation and the why. If your motivation and why, hey, I really want to do this. And I'm very motivated. This is in line with my purpose and mission. This is something I'm very excited about. Then you're still going to have the fear, but it's okay and still take action in the face of fear. And for those who are interested, we do have our course, of course, ketaminestartup.com, where they can take either the therapeutic ketamine delivery course or the ketamine startup. And we get into the protocols, the guidelines, the adverse reactions, the safety factor, so that we can be aware and reduce the likelihood of these challenging experiences.
I think you hit it on the head. The why, the motivation. Because for us, the why and the motivation transcends, and as hokey as that sounds, just money. Because if you wanted just easy money, then yeah, these things are scary. But when it's aligned with your purpose, you put it so well, Sam. And by the way, I was very proud of you when you called me after dealing with doing the emergency cricothyrotomy.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, and I'll share this with the audience, is I didn't get it. So it was one of the few times that I did it, and I did not get that emergency cric. So fortunately, the patient, we had anesthesia backup and we were able to get it taken care of. So he ended up being fine, but I did not get that emergency cric. But that was, I don't know, it was a failure. It was a bad outcome and it was scary, but I still did it with very minimal support. But that actually led me to take advanced airway courses, to learn as much as I can about the procedure, because knowing that it's a pretty rare, isolated procedure that we do. So I just took used that as the impetus to create more training opportunities. And then, because I had taken all these courses and I had studied, another event came up. I remember working in the ER where this lady, she was on ACE inhibitors. She had huge angioedema, which for those listeners who may or may not know, that's like the lip swelling, the tongue swelling. Her neck was huge, a lot of adipose tissue. I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to get this cric. I'm not going to be able to get it into her mouth because, again, her tongue was like the size of a baseball in her mouth. But because I had taken those courses, I did a fiber optic nasal intubation, which was really badass and like just a lot of fun. Taking action in the face of fear, knowing that we will grow and learn from everything. I think having that mindset can also be very productive for opening up a ketamine clinic.
And then you also brought up a good point of, in those moments of fear or when failure does happen, is the opportunity for growth. It's that opportunity is like, it got that uncomfortable. It got that life altering, earth shaking enough to where you're like, you know what? I am going to carve out time to learn, take my training further, to learn more. And it's whether it's more education, more training, going a different direction, pivoting, that is, I feel when we come from the perspective of all these things are here to serve us, to help us become better human beings, to better serve our patients, to better serve our community. And honestly, that's what it did. You did all the extra training and then you were able to help that lady with angioedema. And I also remember that story when you told me back when I was an ophthalmologist. I was just like, oh my gosh, that sounds horrid. I am like cut from a different cloth from you. But honestly, learning from how you take action in the face of fear. Of course, there's precautions that we take and we're being mindful. We're not being cavalier. You're trained, and yet you can have all this training and still have that bit of that stomach clenching, butterflies in the stomach. And yet you take the leap, and then it's great when it goes well. And when it doesn't, that's an opportunity for growth. I think and I'm just thinking having a way to shift our perspectives for seeing a more holistic bird's eye view has really helped serve us to also help when we're talking with our patients. When I was doing that as an ophthalmologist, like when that was that overlap of us starting our clinic and me seeing patients in my ophthalmology practice, just understanding that taking action, shifting perspective, I know that has helped you, Sam, when you speak with your patients here in our clinic.
Yeah. And then the other thing is going to close the loop and talk about Matthew Perry, because that was pretty major in the news cycle. Probably people don't talk about it a lot now, and you may not even be aware of this. But I think it goes back to what can we learn, right? What can we learn from Matthew Perry's passing? Some of the takeaways from that, because again, life is about experiences and growing and learning. Maybe it's not safe to use ketamine alone in a jacuzzi at very high 10x anesthetic levels. And educating the public about that. Like this is irresponsible use or unsafe use, and then safe use in the clinic with vital sign, oxygen, cardiac rhythm, blood pressure monitoring, like with medical professionals. Like that's a safe way to do it. And I do want to give this analogy because I think it works out really well. Is imagine there's two drivers, and let's call the first driver Anna. Anna is a very safe, responsible driver. She always puts on her seatbelt. She checks her blind spot before she passes someone on the highway. She always goes right at speed limit or maybe even at 2 or 3 miles, but she does it in a responsible way. So that's Anna. And then let's say there's another person, let's call him Billy, driving the same exact car. But Billy is a bit reckless and he speeds. He doesn't wear a seatbelt. He doesn't get his tires checked. He doesn't check his blind spot before he merges, etc. Sometimes he even drinks before he drives. So it's the same exact car, but those two drivers are going to have very different outcomes. Anna's going to get to her place that she wants to go from point A to point B very safely, whereas Billy may not even get there. And as a matter of fact, he may kill some other people while he's driving on the road or kill himself. So again, ketamine is a tool. It's a very powerful tool, and we want to use it as responsibly, ethically, with the highest level of standards and safety and integrity as possible.
Nice. Nice. I guess from my perspective, from a marketing communications perspective, takeaway point is it's going to come up in the media, ketamine, whether it's good or bad, and have that be an opportunity for you to, and for us too, as well, because as we run our own practice of, how can we better educate? How am I communicating about ketamine therapy on my website, on my social media, in my communications with my patients? Do I have my newsletter up so that I can share with patients that, yes, we're aware of this incident or this situation that you may be aware of in the media? Do I have communication lines open with the public and with my patients? And do I need to adjust how I share information? So it's giving it an opportunity instead of it being something, oh, darn, oh, crap, something's happened again. Oh, did you hear this? It's instead of having that response, it's okay, let's take a look at how our clinic, being on brand, being aligned with our values, how can we respond to this, to our patients and to the public in the community we serve?
I think we're going to wrap it up. And thank you so much for listening and watching, and stay tuned for the next episode. And as always, if you could leave us a 5-star review on your platform, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that would mean a huge deal to us, and it will just help more people gain information. So we really appreciate you, and thanks for staying till the very end. Take care.